All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Menachem Av, to thank Benjamin and Elys Wohl from the Tanya Eretz Yisrael for dedicating all of Shir and Drashos this month in honor of Moishe Abramson and Jeremy Lasson, for everything they do to make the shiurim available to those outside of our physical Bais Midrash. To thank Jack Bennett for dedicating all the Sherman Joshua this month in memory of Sergeant Nicholai Rappaport of the Givati Brigade, who was killed in a Hezbullah ambush in southern Lebanon in February 1998. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Gregg and Rachel Levitan, with gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the entire Kehila for the opportunity to learn Torah each and every day. A special thanks to all of the Daf Yomi Maggidei Shiur, to Rabbi Richter, to Kalman Akiva Kovacs, to the other Maggidei Shiur have enhanced our learning as well. I'm just going to read because it's such a beautiful dedication to every member of the Daf, Ari Lerner, and the crew providing us with coffee over the years, Moishe Abramson and Jeremy Lasson, to allow us to continue online in Eretz Yisrael, to Saeed Hakin for his incredible contributions, and to Alan Weisman for his woodworking contributions in many different ways. We thank the Levitans for the beautiful, beautiful dedication. Daf Yomi today is sponsored by Saeed and Hakin in honor of Gregg and Rachel Levitan. And in their Hashem, their upcoming Aliyah. Gregg, is this your last live share with us for now? So, Mir Hashem, we wish the Levitans an incredible, incredible hatzlacha in this next fantastic chapter of their life, which they are Zoche Mir Hashem, to be able to live out in Eretz Yisrael together with Am Yisrael Halalai. We should be Zoche Mir Hashem to join you B'karov. With that, let us begin. So Shachiano Vikimano Vihigiano Lasmanazeh. Today is our last daf of Mesechas Gittin, and an incredible and overwhelming and magnificent daf. It is a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Even though it's a short daf, it's a really incredible way to end out this Mesechta. So today's daf is daf Tzadik 90. We are picking up at the Mishnah on the top of Tzadik. So the Mishnah says as follows. If you didn't know that, you didn't read your WhatsApp message last night, right? So we are starting in Eretz Hashem at the Mishnah, and I will say the Mishnah says as follows. Beis Shammai Omrim. Beis Shammai says as follows. Lo yigarish adam es ishto, ela imkin matzaba erva, ela imkin matzaba dvar erva. The boss said it's actually fascinating. In the last Mishnah of the Masechta is the Mishnah that speaks about the criteria for divorce, which is so fascinating, because again, one would have thought that this would have been the opening Mishnah of the Masechta. But the truth is, it's not a surprise, because we know that really the goal of the Masechta is to give us the mechanics of divorce. Now that we are armed with the mechanics, the Masechta ends off by telling us when those mechanics should be utilized. So she does Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai holds, a man should only divorce his wife for a matter of immorality. The only reason to get divorced is because a man has found within his wife some matter of immorality. Okay, Shnei Amar, the pasuk says, Ki matza ba ervas davar. So we'll say, so again, Beis Shammai says, listen, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk, when it comes to divorce, says, "Kikach ish isha ba'ala v'hayayim tinsachin de'inav ki matza ba ervas davar v'kasav la sefer krisos." So we'll say, Beis Shammai said, look, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk of divorce, Dafka talks about this. If you find a matter of immorality within your wife, v'kasav la sefer krisos, you'll write her a get. Sefer Beis Shammai says the Torah itself is telling you the only grounds for divorce is immorality. Fine. Bais Hillel says, Afilu hekdicha tavshilo. Now, I will say it's very interesting. So Bais Hillel says, that's not true. You could get divorced essentially for even something much more minor. For example, let's say she burns his food. He doesn't like the way that she cooks. Look at Rashi. Hikdicha sarfa al yedei ar shekarnadush obemelach. So I'll say, Rashi just points out, it could be either she burnt the food, she put too much salt in the food. He doesn't like the way that she cooks. So I'll say, so obviously what Bais Hillel is trying to do is create a contrast. Right? So what's interesting to note over here is as follows. Beis Shammai says it has to be a matter of immorality. Bais Hillel says that halacha l'maaseh, even for much lesser cause, one could get divorced. Now listen to this. Shne'emar ki matzah ba ervas davar. So it's interesting because from the Mishnah it's not immediately clear what Bais Hillel is saying, because Bais Hillel is quoting the same pasuk as Bais Shammai, ki matzah ba ervas davar. So Rashi, we'll take a Rashi. Rashi kind of like a spoiler alert over here, right? Rashi gives it away already in Mishnah. As Rashi says, matzah ba ervas davar le Bais Hillel mashmala o erva o shar dvar sirchon. So I will say it's interesting. Whereas Bais Shammai reads the phrase ki matzah ba ervas davar, Bais Shammai reads that he has found a matter of immorality within his wife. Bais Hillel reads it ki matzah ba erva or davar, whether he finds within her a matter of immorality or davar or something else. Rabbi Akiva will say that's the second shita. Rabbi Akiva says afilu matzah acheres noa himena. Rabbi Akiva says even if he just finds someone who is more beautiful than she is, he has the right to divorce her. Shene'emar v'haya imlo simsa chen be'inav. Because the pasuk says she no longer finds favor in his eyes. So I will say, let's just plot the machlokes. This is actually quite interesting. So here's what you have. What's the nature of Because Rosi, even when you look at Bais Shammai and Rabbi Akiva, when you look at Bais Hillel and Rabbi Akiva, are they really saying separate things? So they really are. If you think about it, it's as follows. Bais Shammai is saying criteria for divorce, immorality. Man finds something immoral in his wife, right? Or for that matter, again, the converse could technically be true as well. It's only framing it in the husband to the wife, because remember, again, from the biblical perspective, so get is a husband-driven process. But again, it could work on the reverse as well. A wife finds something immoral about her husband. She could go to Beis and sue for divorce, so to speak. All right, but in any event, we'll keep it the way the Mishnah explains it. So according to Bais Shammai, the only grounds for divorce is a matter of immorality. Bais Hillel says, there has to be cause for divorce. There has to be cause. But the cause doesn't have to be immorality. So that's why Bais Hillel says he doesn't like the way that she cooks. Okay, that's cause. That's cause. Whether you think it's correct cause or not correct cause, Lamaisa, there's a reason. Rabbi Akiva comes along and says, there doesn't even have to be cause. There doesn't have to be cause. Afilu matzah no'ehemenu. You find someone you like better, you find a woman you find more attractive, there doesn't have to be cause. There doesn't have to be cause. I will say, by the way, just as an aside, what's Rabbi Akiva's logic? Rabbi Akiva's logic is, it doesn't make sense to keep people stuck in a marriage they don't want to be in. I will say, Rahman al-Islam, people check out of relationships all of the time and for all kinds of reasons. And Rabbi Akiva will say, the reason might be totally illegitimate. But what's the benefit of keeping someone in a relationship from which they are fundamentally checked out of if they have no intention of checking back in? I just want to be clear. You understand, Rabbi Akiva is not chas v'shalom encouraging this kind of behavior. Right? Rabbi Akiva is not saying, if you find someone else more beautiful, okay, sure, leave this life, go to that life. That's chas v'shalom. No one's encouraging that behavior. Rabbi Akiva is giving us, however, a fundamental window into relationship dynamics. If at the end of the day the husband is checked out, even for something so base and so superficial, in that he's found someone who's prettier, and that's where his head is, this is not a relationship that's going to last. In any event, a fundamental three-way machlokes as to what the grounds are for divorce. Bais Shammai, immorality. Bais Hillel, really any cause. Rabbi Akiva, even without cause, any reason, you're just checked out of the relationship. Good. That's the Mishnah will say. Let's as well. We'll see, of course, what is most striking in this over here is how Bais Hillel is so makel, so to speak, when it comes to divorce, and Bais Shammai is so machmir, right? The chumrah in that Bais Shammai is only giving you a very small window in which divorce ultimately, again. Actually, let's go through the Gemara first. Good. Says the Gemara. So Tanya, Omru Bais Hillel Bais Shammai. So Bais Hillel said to Bais Shammai, Valo kvar ne'amar davar. So I'll say, remember again, Bais Hillel's entire premise is built on how they view that phrase, right? Ki matzah ba ervas davar. That's the phrase. That's the phrase that Bais Shammai and Bais Hillel are focusing on. So Bais Shammai will say, it's a phrase. When do you get divorced? Ki matzah ba ervas davar. When you find a matter of immorality. Bais Hillel's reading it as ki matzah ba ervas or davar. So again, Tanya, Amr Bais Hillel Bais Shammai, Bais Hillel Bais Shammai, halo kivar ne'emar davar. The pasuk says davar. So the pasuk clearly indicates that halacha l'maisa, you could get divorced for any quote unquote legitimate reason. Amr Bais Shammai, halo kivar ne'emar ervas. So Bais Shammai says, Bais Hillel, well, what do you think? Like you're a Hasidic Rebbe, that you could just go ahead and start putting in commas into psukim, right, where they don't belong? No, that's not the way it works. Ervas davar is a phrase. It's one phrase. Halacha l'maisa again. Well, what are you doing with that? Amar lahem Bais Hillel, im ne'emar ervas, v'lo ne'emar davar. So Bais Hillel says like this. I'll tell you why the pasuk is phrased the way that it's phrased. Im ne'emar ervas, v'lo ne'emar davar. Had the pasuk just said ervas but not said davar, hayisi omer mishum erva teitze, mishum davar lo teitze. So we'll say the pasuk could have just said ki matzah ba erva, and then the pasuk would have read, when does a man get divorced? When he finds a matter of immorality. And I would have thought mishum davar lo teitze, but because of any other reason you don't leave. Therefore, lekach ne'emar davar. So we'll say essentially what Bais Hillel says to the Shammai is, the word davar is really extra. You actually don't need it for the pasuk. So why is it there? It's there to teach me that halacha l'maisa, that there's a different criteria for divorce. What's the different criteria for divorce? Davar. And we'll say again, just to be clear, davar means you need grounds, right? You need grounds. You do need a davar. But the davar does not have to measure up to an erva. Vilu ne'emar davar v'lo ne'emar erva. Furthermore, had the pasuk just said davar, so we'll say, so here's what's interesting. See, according to Bais Hillel, then the question you have to ask is, if the pasuk says davar, then what? Why do you need erva? Because we'll say, obviously, if you can get divorced because of davar, what does davar mean? Grounds. So if you could get divorced because of davar, then obviously, again, it goes without saying erva. Why do you have to put in there erva? Ve'ilu ne'emar davar v'lo ne'emar erva. Ervas hayisi omer mishum davar tinasi la'acher u'mishum erva lo tinasi la'acher. Lekach ne'emar ervas. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. Had it just said davar, I would have said, when does a woman have a license to remarry after divorce? Only when her husband divorced her because of a davar. But if he divorced her because of ervas, because of immorality, maybe she has no license to remarry, right? Which I will say there's a logic to that, right? If a woman has demonstrated immoral behavior, so perhaps again there's grounds to say she shouldn't be able to remarry anyone else. Kamashmal in the pasuk says ervas davar, and I also remember again in the same pasuk, I should say in the next pasuk, it says he writes to a sefer krisos. V'nasam biyado, v'shulcha mi beiso, and then v'haisa li'ish acher. Torah also speaks about remarriage. So therefore, again, I will say, so this is fascinating. So if you take the whole drush according to Bais Hillel, it's like this. The drush is like this. Ervas davar teaches me a number of things. Ervas davar, so davar teaches me that halacha l'maisa, a man could divorce his wife for any grounds. Right? You have to have grounds. I don't know if I'm using it the right word. Right? You have to have grounds for a divorce, but it doesn't have to be in a matter of immorality. Any grounds. What does ervas teach me? Ervas teaches me that even if he does divorce her because of immorality, she does have a right to remarry. Okay, so Bais Shammai will say, "Hi davar my avdilei." So we'll say, what do Bais Shammai do with davar? Because remember, again, according to Bais Shammai, the only grounds for divorce are ervas. Our immorality. So is immorality. So therefore, again, Allah, so what do they do with davar? So this is fascinating. So the Gemara says, Ne'emar kan davar, it says over here in the pasuk by divorce davar, but ne'emar lahalon davar. And it says later on davar, which davar we're referring to? Apish ne'edim or apish lo she'edim yakum davar. So I will say this is the classic davar by eidos. This davar teaches us that in order to go ahead and solidify something as a halachic fact, you require eidos, you require testimony, and I will say testimony means two witnesses. So the Gemara says, Ma lahalon b'shnei edim, afkan b'shnei edim, just like over there by eidos. Ultimately, again, eidos means two people. So too over here, Seidus means two people. So I'll say, Beis Shammai will say that if a husband wants to prove something immoral in his wife, immorality is only proven with the presence of two witnesses. Two witnesses. So I'll say, so remember again, so according to Beis Shammai, Ervas teaches me that Allah said the only grounds for divorce are immorality. Davar teaches me that this matter of immorality must be proven through two witnesses. Okay, beautiful. I mean, not beautiful, but you understand. Beis Hillel miksiv erva badavar. So I will say, so it's interesting. Beis Hillel will say, well, if that's what the pasuk is coming to teach me, it should have been phrased as erva badavar. Namely, the way to prove erva is badavar, meaning through davar. Davar means two witnesses. Beis Shammai miksiv o erva o davar. Beis Shammai will retort back to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel, does the pasuk say o erva o davar? So remember again, both for Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the pasuk is not phrased in what we'll call the ideal way, which supports either of their drashas, right? Either way, we'll say, I have to understand, the Torah is written perfectly. But the Torah is written in ways which opens itself up to these different interpretations. In other words, the Maharal brings down, why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us his Torah with nekudos, with vowels? Besides the fact that for the Balei Kriya, imagine how much easier life would be, right? If the nekudos are there. So the Maharal says it's purposely done that way because the absence of nekudos in the Torah, the absence of vowels in the Torah, allows for interpretation. Right? Remember again, a word vocalized in a particular way often could only be interpreted in one way. We have so many different drashas, right? A kri and a ksiv, or different words that can be read different ways. So we'll say, so it's interesting. So even you look at this, the Torah phrases it, ki matzah ba ervas davar. So remember again, if it would have been written erva ba davar, that would have been explicitly like Beis Shammai. If it would have been o erva o davar, explicitly like Beis Hillel. So how does the Ribono Shel Olam choose to phrase his Torah? Ervas davar. What does that do? It opens it up both for the drashas of Beis Hillel as well as for the drashas of Beis Shammai. It's fascinating how this shivim parnal Torah, see, sometimes we think the Torah is vague or the Torah is ambiguous. Chas v'shalom, nothing further from the truth. The Torah is perfect. But the Rebbe Shalom sometimes phrases it in this way so as to allow for the multiple interpretations. It's incredible. So the Gemara says, Beis Shammai, miksiv o erva davar, Beis Hillel, lahachi ksiv ervas davar, te mashmahachi o mashmahachi. So Rabbi says, remember again, Beis Hillel has an answer. According to Beis Hillel, the Torah purposely phrases it as ervas davar, because remember again, it really teaches us two different things, as we just saw before. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Beis Hillel, nami vadai mi bailuhu lahachi, le'inyan lakofa lahotzi de lo kaifina lahotzi ela be'ervas be'edus berura, mi ulahachi ksiv ervas davar v'lo ksiv erva badavar v'lo ksiv nami o ervas o davar kechi de lidrushe betarvayu de mishtama erva o davar o mashma nami erva badavar. So we'll say, so remember again, according to Beis Hillel says the Torah purposely phrases it in this way to teach me a variety of different halachas. Number one, that halacha l'maisa, the only time we'll force a husband to divorce his wife is when there is eidos that there's erva. If there's eidos that there's erva, then ultimately again that we will compel upon the husband to divorce his wife. If there is no erva, according to Beis Hillel, husband still has the right to divorce her either because of erva or davar, or some other grounds. Okay, beautiful. So we'll say, so now what we've done is we've clarified the positions of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel telling us the only grounds for divorce ultimately again are going to be erva, and the only reason the Torah includes the word davar is to teach us that this erva must be proven like any other legal matter, i.e. through the testimony of two witnesses. Beis Hillel telling me that halacha l'maisa, you could go ahead and get divorced for any grounds, right? For anything you want. L'maisa, it's got to be grounds, though. Davar teaches me any grounds. Again, what Rashi throws in there is that according to Beis Hillel, what erva will do is, if there is a matter of immorality, we will compel upon him to go ahead and divorce his wife. Okay, now we come to the third position, the position of Rabbi Akiva. Says in Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva says, you don't need grounds. You don't need grounds, right? So remember, according to Rabbi Akiva, you just decide, you know what? It was a good run, but I found someone more beautiful than you, right? I found someone nicer than you. I found someone I liked better than you. Or I just lost interest, right? Which all sounds terrible, but Rabbi Akiva says, L'maisa, you can get divorced for that as well. So am I coming to figure out, so what are they arguing about? So bid Reish Lakish. So this is actually fascinating. They're arguing Reish Lakish. Why? Reish Lakish, ki. Both say the word ki, mishamesh bedal l'shonos. Both say the word ki itself has 4 different meanings. If, dilma, perhaps, ella, but, daha, because. Now both say, now watch this. Now remember, the Lasson in the pasuk is ki matzah ba ervas davar. So both say, this is fascinating. So up until now, what we've been focused on is ervas davar. That's what we've been focused on, ervas davar. So now the Gemara says, by the way, there's another machlokes, which is how you interpret the introductory word of ki. Now watch this. Bais Savri, ki matzah ba ervas davar, daha matzah ba ervas davar. So we'll say, Bais Shammai will say ki means daha, because. Why are you divorcing your wife? Ki matzah ba, because you have found ervas davar. And I will say again, like we saw the way Bais Shammai understands that pasuk. So watch how Bais Shammai reads the pasuk. Ki, because you have found within your wife matzah ba ervas, a matter of immorality, davar, that has been proven through 2 witnesses. That's why you get divorced. Okay. Rabbi Akiva savar, Rabbi Akiva will hold ki matzah ba ervas davar. Inami matzah ba ervas davar. So Rabbi Akiva will say, if you find the ervas davar, or you find something else, whatever the reason is, you could go ahead and you could get divorced. Armali Rappaport the Rabba. So I'm supposed to says Rabba. So Rappaport said Rabba. So says the sheet Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva just understands that ultimately, again, the word ki means if. But if doesn't mean something definitive. If you find erva, if you find davar, if you find something else, if you find someone else, whatever the reason is, lamaisa, you have the right to get divorced. Armali Rappaport Rabba. So Rappaport said Rabba. Lo matzaba lo erva lo davar mahu. We'll say now, Rappaport is asking a fascinating question. Rappaport, according to Rashi, Rappaport is asking in Bais Hillel. Right? So also remember again. So Bais Hillel holds you need grounds. What happens if a man divorced his wife? No erva, right? No davar. Essentially like Rabbi Akiva, right? A man just divorced his wife. He just decided, he found someone else more beautiful. So no erva, no davar. So both say, so Rappaport Shayla Torah is like this. If he did it and he divorced her, mahu. What's the halacha? And I will say, now, what's the shayla? The shayla is, would we compel him to remarry her? If a man divorced his wife without grounds for divorce, would we go ahead and force him to remarry? Amarle, so Rabbi said, Midgali Rachmana Gabe Ones, Lo Yuchal Shachal Kol Yamav Ba'amud V'Hach Zerkai, Hasam Hu Degali Rachmana, Aval Hacha, Maida Avid. Shabbos says, listen to this. The Torah says, so Rava answers as follows. Let me read. I don't know why I read it all at once. Let me break it up. So Amarle Midgal Rachmana Gabi Ones. So we'll say Kis of Ones is a man who violates a woman. So we'll say, what's the halacha if a man violates a woman? Lo yuchal shachal kol yamav. So we'll say part of the penalty is, so there's penalty payments, and part of the ongoing penalty is he's never allowed to divorce her. Right? So the Maisa all his days. And I will say, not only that, if he does divorce her, there's an obligation to remarry her. Right? So the Torah says like this. So Rava says like this. Kol yama ba'amad v'hachzer kai. Even if he divorces her, he's obligated to remarry her. Hasam hu digali rachmana. So I will say it's only in that case of ones. It's only in that specific case of ones where if a man violates a woman, he's first of all he has to remain married to her. He's not allowed to divorce her. And if he does divorce her, he has to remarry her. It's only that case where he has to remarry her. About halcha, I will say, but in other cases, my da'avid avid. What's done is done. What's done is done. In other words, I will say, so what the Gemara is saying is, even according to Bais Hillel and according to Bais Shammai, where there are very specific grounds for divorce, if you just man just divorced his wife, for no reason, halacha l'maisa, once the divorce is done, the divorce is done. I will say, we've mentioned many times that the most incredible words in all of Shas is that line, my da'avid avid. What's done is done. We spend so much time in life focusing on the past. And for those of us, which maybe as many of us, include myself in this, who have made some significant mistakes in the past that we cannot correct, it is so often so difficult to go ahead and get my attention off those mistakes and just keep on focusing, on perseverating over them over and over and over. And we lament them. And we feel so heartbroken over them. But Lamaisa, there is certainly something to dwelling on the past for a little bit of time, focusing on the past for a little bit of time, but at a certain point in time, a person has to find the koach to move on. The mashal we always use, I always say, is like a person who drives, and the entire time that they're driving, they're always looking in the rear view mirror. It's good to check your rear view mirror once in a while. But if you drive the entire time looking in the rear view mirror, you are going to slam into the car in front of you. If you spend your life always looking in retrospective fashion, you cannot move yourself forward. It's good to examine the past, good to learn from the past, good to take something from the past, but at a certain point in time, a person also has to close the book on the past and be able to utter the most incredible and transformative words, and be able to say, my dehava hava. What was. What was. We're going to close that chapter, close that book, and now it's time for me to focus my energies on building a beautiful future. Good. We'll say another interesting halach. If a man has decided that he is going to divorce his wife, it's actually a very profound Gemara. Let's say a man has decided he's done. He's going to leave this marriage, right? But he hasn't shared that with his wife. So from his wife's perspective, again, everything is, whether it's fine or not, the point is she thinks that they're remaining married. And as a result, she's continuing to serve him. Mishawasha just means like she's running the house, she's running life like a regular. So it's mahu. So kari alei al tachrosh arei echara for yoshe levet achitak. So we'll say quotes over here the pasuk. It's actually very profound from Mishlei. Literally again, al tachrosh arei echara. Don't sow evil against your friend, and he is sitting in security with you. So we'll say in a relationship. The Gemara is saying it's always very important for a spouse to know where the other is holding. And if a husband is checked out of a relationship, the greatest disservice he could do for his wife is not to tell her where he's holding, and vice versa. All of this applies in both ways. So the Gemara paints a picture over here of a wife who is committed to a marriage, who is working on a marriage, and the husband is not. The Gemara says, if your wife is working on the marriage and you're not working on the marriage, you know what that's like? That's like, again, sowing evil against your friend when he is sitting securely with you. Incredible. Tanya, Ari Lerner says, Kishem sha'deos b'maichol, kach deos b'nashim. So we'll say this is very interesting. This is fascinating. The same way that people... Now, all right, so look at Rashi for just a moment. Deos b'maichol. So if you look, it's 4 lines are from the bottom of Rashi. Deos b'maichol. Deos b'nei adam chalukos bi'istenisus. I will say there are different levels of fastidiousness. My favorite word, fastidiousness, right? So I'll say istenis. You know what the Hebrew word for an istenis is? A mifunak, right? A mifunak. It sounds so much better in Hebrew, right? A fastidious person, right? A mifunak, a person is just like very sensitive to things, right? So I'll say there are different levels of isteninus, right? Istenisos. There are different levels of fastidiousness when it comes to food. Rashi says, Yeshu istinis v'katzama. Okay, so actually let's take a look. He says, Rashi, Yeshu istinis v'katz b'machal machmas mius muat v'yesh she'enu istinis kol kach v'yesh she'enu istinis klal kach deos chalukos bepritzos yesh makbid al pritzos muat v'yesh she'enu makbid kol kach v'yesh she'enu makbid klal. So I'll say it's interesting. The same way that there are different levels of fastidiousness or sensitivity when it comes to food, there's also different levels of fastidiousness, right? Or istenisos, or mifunakite when it comes to immorality. right? In other words, we'll say people have different levels, people have different tolerance levels for food and for immorality. You're going to see why these two things are linked. Look at Rashi. Look at the Gemara. The same Rabbi said that there are different levels of fastidiousness, right? When it comes to food, so too there are different levels of fastidiousness and tolerance when it comes to morality as well. You could have a person that a fly falls into his cup, he won't touch it anymore. Right? Even if he throws the fly away, he will not drink. He will not drink from the cup. He won't touch it. So we'll say, so this in the eyes of Chazal is a heightened level of fastidiousness. So we'll say, so understand, right? This already was like the height of being a mifunak, right? The height of istiness. Midos Papos ben Yehuda. This was the midah of Papos ben Yehuda. Shayno b'fnei ishtav Yosei. And I will say, the same way that Papos ben Yehuda had no tolerance, like for like the fly, even if he removed it, he also was very sensitive to any level of immorality. And Rashi points out what he would do is, when he would leave his house, he would lock his wife in the house. He would lock his wife. Rashi points out the very Papos ben Yehuda, last two lines of Rashi. Rashi says, Papos ben Yehuda, he was the husband of Miriam, the hairdresser. That was her. She was a hairdresser. Because she yotzei mibeso l'shuk no das b'fanai. When he would leave his house for the shuk, ultimately again he would go ahead and close the door, right? Lock her in. Shelo tedaber l'chol. Now, why did he do that? He didn't want her talking to any other men. And Rashi points out over here, umida she'ena hogenesi. This is not appropriate behavior to lock your wife in the house. He says, Shemitoch kach eva nichnesas b'neim zana tachtav. We'll say, why? You don't even need an explanation from this. Because locking your wife in the house causes incredible animosity. And animosity, ultimately, Rashi says, could easily lead to immoral behavior. So we'll say that there's so much to be said about this in general, which is how exerting unhealthy control in the marriage fundamentally undermines the fabric of marriage. Marriage is a partnership. Marriage is a partnership. And when one spouse does not feel respected and does not feel like they have autonomy and does not feel like they have an equal voice in the relationship, it erodes everything. So we'll say, so again, just understand what is Papos ben Yehuda's logic. If you ask Papos ben Yehuda, he's just trying to preserve the marriage, right? You ask him, right? He's just trying to preserve the moral fabric of the marriage by keeping his wife in the house. Meanwhile, what is he doing? He's stifling her. He's stifling her, he's treating her like an object. He's doing all of those things. So we'll say, so it turns out the rest of the story is that his wife actually ended up committing adultery. So obviously, again, I will say, this is not the right approach. Not the right approach. Okay, next. We'll say it's also, there's so much to say in each of these things also. We'll say about how, in general, whenever you take an extreme approach to preventing some type of problem, the extreme approach never works. It never works. It's true, and you can plug it into anything in life. Any events, let's go back there. Then there's another guy. Guy number 2. What happens when the fly falls into his cup? What does he do? He removes it and he drinks the wine. You know what I'm saying? From the eyes of Chazal, that's the right approach. That's the right approach. I will say, so that's the right approach of a man who goes ahead and understands, of course his wife is going to speak with men, right? So who's she going to speak with? Her relatives. But I will say, but where does he, so to speak, draw the lines in their relationship? With over-socialization with men who are not her relatives. So let's say, so again, they said you can't speak to any man, you can't interact like that. First of all, I'll say, in general, just the husband telling his wife, understand this is also reflective, I will say, of different societal norms, right? I want to go on record with talking about this as well. I'll say, be careful what you tell your wife she can or can't do in any area, right? Different times, different marital dynamics, or I'll say, don't legislate your wife's behavior in any way. That's not the right paradigm for marriage contemporarily for us to have proper shalom bayis. Just to be clear. Again, we're talking to the eyes of Chazal. Marriage obviously was a very different institution on many different levels. So the idea over here, the Gemara says, the Midah Beinonis recognizes that a man realizes his wife is going to have social interaction with men. But that social interaction should be limited ultimately, again, to people who are related to her. Right? But Lamaisa, social interaction or enhanced social interaction with men who are not her relatives, that's not good. That's not good. Third category, V'zeh midas kadam. Fine. The next case, then there's another guy, right? The other guy is the fly falls into his food. What happens? He sucks the food, he eats the food. I will say now, the Farshim point out over here that it must be that the fly, obviously not that the fly is sitting there and he eats it, but the fly dissolves into the food and he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He just goes to town on the food. Zohi midas adam ra. This, I will say, is the midah, a midah of a person. I will say, you can see it over here. This is the midah of a person who just doesn't care about anything. He just doesn't care. And really, I will say, what this also represents is a very hedonistic type of lifestyle. All he's interested is in pleasure. A person like this, sheroas ishto yotza, v'rosha pora. A man like this, he sees that his wife goes out with uncovered hair. Vitava bashuk. She goes ahead and she weaves in the marketplace. I will say, the whole chap of weaving is, remember again, the weaving was that a woman would go out and place the spindle between her legs. So it would require sitting in a semi-immodest fashion. That's how a woman would often weave, like in a more private setting. If she's doing this in the marketplace, that represents immorality. Amud Beis, upruma mishnei tzdadeha. And once she goes out, Rashi points out over here, there was an Edomite fashion statement, or Edomite fashion, where women would go out with sleeves that were open on the sides above the elbows. So once again, she's going out in an immoral fashion. V'rochetzes in bnei adam, and she bathes with men. So the Gemara says, what? In bnei adam, she bathes with men? Like, that's actually, we'll say, so that's just outright immorality. So the Gemara says, in bnei adam, ella b'makom shebnei adam rochtzin. Rather, she bathes in the same place where men bathe. Rashi says over here, "Makom shebnei adam rochtzin, vehi nichneses le'eineihem la'achar yitziason, kishen lovshin bigdeihem." So Rabbi says, so what happens? So in the bathhouse, there are men's hours, there are women hours. But Lamaisa, again, she would come into the bathhouse when the men are still dressing. So the idea is she's just exhibiting overtly immoral behavior. So the Gemara says, Zu mitzvah min haTorah legarsha. This type of woman, ultimately, again, there is a mitzvah mid'oraisa to divorce her. Shne'emar ki matza ba ervas davar. So I will say, ultimately, this is actually interesting, I will say. So what you see over here, we're coming from circle a little bit. So first of all, the Gemara just points out that Lamaisa, it is fascinating to see how there are just three different models in terms of how men interact with their wives when it comes to these types of behavior. So you have the extremist, the papas who locks his wife in the house. Certainly not good, right? And then you have, again, the husband who doesn't care. He's eating the fly in the food. To him, whatever she does, it doesn't make any difference, which is also, we'll say, both of those are incredibly tragic, right? The Papas Ben Yehuda model is tragic because it's an authoritarian, dictatorial type of relationship, which is unhealthy. The third model, which is a husband who just doesn't care what his wife does, which is equally as tragic. And then there's the middle of the road model. The middle of the road model is a couple who establishes this balance. And I will say again, there's a couple, and this goes for men and women. Do a husband and wife have to be careful with their interactions with members of the opposite sex? Of course, I will say, of course, right? None of us are malachi asharis. We're not angels. None of us are angels. And we are human beings with temptations and desires, and we always have to be on guard to make sure that we are adhering to the highest levels of moral conduct. At the same time, is there a place for interaction with members of the opposite sex? Of course, as long as it's done bikdusha ubitara. And that's, again, I will say, that's that middle ground. But a woman who goes out and exhibits this type of immoral behavior, the Gemara says, mitzvah legarsha shneimar, ki matzva ervasar, v'shulcha mi beisa v'halcha, v'ais lishacher. And I will say, so now what happens? The Torah says, he divorces her, she'll now go to be someone else's wife. So the Gemara says, hakasav karo acher. Torah calls the second husband an acher. It's interesting. I will say, it's right. It says the husband number one will divorce her, and she'll become a wife to acher, to someone else. Lomar she'in ze ben zugo l'rishon. The second guy, is of much inferior quality to the first husband. Why? Zeh hosi risha mi beso. First husband divorced his wife because of a matter of immorality. Vizu hechnis risha l'soch beso. And this second guy married this woman. Second guy married this woman. Now both say, it's a very specific case over here, where husband number one divorced her because of a matter of immorality. And now again, see, he's taking something negative out of his house. Husband number two then marries this woman who's behaved in an immoral way, is introducing something immoral into his home. So Zacha, Sheni Shacha. So we'll say if the second husband is Zocha, he'll divorce her as well. Shnei Amar, Usnea Ha'isha Acharon, Ve'im Lav Kovarto. But if he's not Zocha, she will end up burying him. Husband two, Shnei Amar, Oki Yomos Ha'isha Acharon, Kidai Hu B'misa. The second husband deserves death. Because husband number one again removed this evil from his home. Husband number two introduced this evil into his home. So it's obviously they're talking a very specific case where the marriage dissolved because of immorality. And the Gemara just cautioning husband number two about marrying this woman whose first marriage dissolved because of immorality. I will say, I just want to give a word of caution to this. There's another piece to this. The fact that the Torah provides for second marriage, even in the case of immorality. Also, right? I want to just point out something very interesting to you over here. So let's play this out. Right? Reuben's married to Rachel. Rachel is immoral. Let's go with Beis Shammai. The Gemara says over here, Rachel is immoral. Right? And how do we know that? How do we know that she was immoral? How do we know she was immoral? Two witnesses. Now, obviously, it'd have to be with the case where they can't administer a death penalty. Right? For example, let's say there wasn't hasura. Right, or something else, some other technicality. So they're going to get divorced because she was immoral, but she's not going to be punished, so to speak, for her immorality. Now let's say, is she allowed to get remarried? Is she allowed to get remarried? Yes. Now it's interesting, the Torah cautions husband number two against marrying Rachel because if she was immoral, or that's a pretty serious thing. Now let's say, but yet, what do you see? The fact that the Torah does provide for remarriage, even in the case of immorality, tells you what? People could change. People can change. Right? There is such a thing as second chances. And people do make dramatic mistakes and do make traumatic mistakes and catastrophic mistakes. But I will say that need not mark them for the rest of their life. And it could be that Rachel did something really terrible that resulted in the dissolution of her marriage. But I want to point out, why doesn't it say, Rachel, you can never remarry? Torah doesn't say that, I just want to point out, Torah does not say that. The Torah in this very context makes provisions for her remarriage to teach you this incredible and overwhelming lesson. Second chances are possible. And second chances are possible even in the aftermath of the most cataclysmic type. I always say, what are we talking about over here? A woman who made a terrible, terrible life decision by engaging in relationship trespass, thereby dissolving her marriage. Yeah, what do we say to her? Rachel, terrible, marriage is over, but Lamai said, can you pick yourself up? Can you regroup? Can you start again? Yes. I will say, by the way, how incredible is this that we're reading this, we're learning this on the eve of Chodesh Elul? I will say, deep down, right? We all think that we have mistakes that we have made. I want to say, that I just want to point out, the entire nature of the marital relationship is a metaphor for our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what happens? I will say, what happens sometimes in life? I'm in a beautiful relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then what happens? You know what happens? I commit immorality. I do something terrible. I betray the relationship. I totally betray the relationship. So I will say, so what happens? Ki matzav la'ervas davar. So sometimes, ultimately, again, we know what happens is I've committed ultimately an ervas davar, and as a result, what happens? V'kasav la sefer krisos. Sometimes, as a result of my trespass against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, there's a division, there's a get, v'shulcha mi beiso, and ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends me, or I send myself away. Torah says, don't despair. V'haisa li'ish acher. And I will say, so in the Torah, by marriage, haisa li'ish acher means she can marry a second husband. Because you know what it means in the metaphorical relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? V'haisa li'ish acher. If I choose to become an ish acher, if I choose to become someone else in the aftermath of my mistakes, I can rebuild myself. I will say. This is incredible. Even there's no such thing as an inability to rebound even in the aftermath of terrible life mistakes. Is it the same afterwards? No. Remember again, could Rachel reconcile with her first husband? Probably not. Probably not. The relationship is going to be different. But v'haisali ish acher, if I'm willing to become someone else, I could rebuild my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no matter how terrible the mistake was. It's such an, and I will say again, it's true in marriage. So again, even Rachel, who destroyed her first marriage, does she get an opportunity, a second chance at happiness? She does. Torah doesn't close the door to marriage to her. She can choose to start again, obviously be with someone else in a different way and rebuild. I will say that is the metaphor for us. There's always second chances, or 20 second chances, or 202nd chances, whatever you need in life, I will say. Again, for us, if you're willing, if you're willing to become someone new, there is no limit to our ability to rebuild. Incredible. We'll say, finish line, let's go. The Gemara over here quotes the pasuk, Ki sonei shalach. Ki sonei shalach. Rabbi Huda Omer, Im sanasa shalach. So Rabbi Huda says what it means is, if you despise your wife, send her away. Right? If there's no right, if she becomes despised. I will say, Rabbi Huda understands that if she becomes despised, how does she become despised? Ultimately, again, through her, Rashi says over here, Rabbi Akiva. If you just dislike her, send her away. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Sama Mishat. Rabbi Yochanan says, no. The man who divorces his wife becomes despised in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'lo pligi, they're not arguing, ha-bezug rishon, ha-bezug sheni. They're not arguing about, so one is talking about a first marriage, Rabbi Yochanan is talking about a first marriage, that a man who divorces his first wife, he is despised. Ultimately, Rabbi Huda is talking about a second marriage. Second marriage, if you want to divorce your wife because you don't like her, that is your license. So Rabbi Lazar, whoever divorces his first wife, afilu mizbeach morid alav demos. The Mizbeach cries for him. The Mizbeach, the altar, sheds tears for him. Shene Emar, v'zos shenis tasu. Furthermore, you do this. Ksus dima. Es Mizbach Hashem bechi ve'anaka me'ayin od benos ala mincha v'lakachas ritzon miyadchem. So we'll say, so the pasuk over here, the pasuk is painting this picture, pasuk in Malachi is painting a picture of a Mizbeach that's crying and a Mizbeach that will no longer accept sacrifices. Why? Amma al ki Hashem heid beinach ubein eishes neurach Hashem agarataba v'chaverasecha ve'eshes brisecha. And why? Why does the Mizbeach cry? The Mizbeach cries because ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that you have left the wife of your youth. You have rebelled against her. She is your friend. She is your friend and your covenantal wife. Rashi says over here, Zug Rishon Eishes Neurim. Then we'll say, and I remember again, going back to the beginning of Masechet Sotah, remember again, I will say, the idea over here is a first wife is the Bashert wife, right? That's the wife where the Gemara says, Bas Kol Yotze. So Bas Kol comes out and says, Bas Ploni LaPloni. That is the wife ultimately, again, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has ordained from above. So the Gemara says, the Mizbeach sheds tears when a husband divorces his wife. This was the Bashert. This was the woman you were supposed to build a life with. Now I'll say, again, to be clear, sometimes is divorce warranted? Of course. But there's always a tragic component in divorce, but there's a compounded tragedy in what the Gemara calls Eishes Neurim, the wife of Eishes Neurecha, the wife of your youth, the wife for whom the Bas Kol came out and cried. I will say, why the Mizbeach? Okay, there's much more to say about this, but why the Mizbeach? I will say, so I saw something incredibly beautiful. The Mizbeach, I will say, if you remember, the Mizbeach, I'll just read to you. The Mizbeach, the Mizbeach, I will say, listen to this. The Chabina Rav brings down, he quotes from the pasuk in Bamidbar after the episode with Korach. So the Torah says, Vayikach Elazar HaKohen Machtos Hanachoshes Vayirakum Sipoy LeMizbeach. The Mizbeach was coated with the fire pans. Remember again, the way that Korach challenged Aaron's right to the Kuna Gedola, everybody brought Kitoras, right? Obviously, they all died. Aaron was left. So we'll say, so what do they do with the fire pans? They hammered them out into sheets and used them as the covering of the Mizbeach. We'll say, why do they use that? Why? We'll say, so ultimately, again, to show that the goal for Klal Yisrael is Achdus. The goal, they took the very tools of Machlokes hammered them into the sheets for the Mizbeach in order to create shalom. I'll say when a couple gets divorced, ein machlokes gedola mizo. There is no, that is the paradigmatic form of machlokes. So who cries, who sheds tears? Ultimately, again, when there's machlokes, who sheds tears? The Mizbeach itself. The Mizbeach, which was supposed to serve as the paradigmatic symbol of Achdus, sheds tears over the dissolution of a marriage. So I will say, we'll have to stop over here for today. We're going to talk more about this conclusion of Masechet Hashem at the Siyum. I think, can you still make reservations for the Siyum? Sure. You can still see Saeed if you still want to make reservations for the Siyum. We'll talk much more about this concluding Rabbi will say. But again, just understand how beautiful, again, we end off with this incredible metaphor that just as sometimes divorce represents that dissolution, right, the unwinding of the fundamental fabric of marriage, but yet again, even in that moment, there is hope for a person to rebuild. Sometimes the fabric of our relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu also becomes untethered, right, or untied. But just like, again, Rachel in our case has the ability to rebuild. Rabbi said the message for us is so profound and so clear as well. Even when we sometimes trespass and betray our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, there is always the ability to rebuild. There is always the ability to remake. If we're willing to become someone else, there is no telling what we could accomplish. I will say, Hadron Allah, Hamagarish, Uslicha La Maseches Gittin, Mazel Tov.